So back by popular request, and the fact that no one else would volunteer for Tommy because he was on baby duty. So I don't know if you remember, a couple weeks ago I spoke about calling all men's responsibilities and how they need to step up and whatever. And I was delicately going through some scriptures and avoiding anything about women. So today I'm speaking to the women. And I want to thank all the men for their positive feedback. Got none. A couple of the ladies contacted me and said, "Oh, that was really good," you know. So anyway, let's go through that. So one of the things that I talked about was how the culture has changed, and for men and also for women. So I'm going to point out what I think are some of those changes. So what I did was I looked up some famous women in history. And I don't know, maybe you guys are familiar with some of them or not, so I'll throw the names out. Clara Barton. I don't know if anybody Clara Barton, but she was a nurse during the Civil War, and she actually, through her work, started the Red Cross organization. So she saw a need, and she met it through her skills and abilities, but she saw a need, and she acted out, and she created the Red Cross organization, which exists today and is very powerful, very important. Florence Nightingale. I'm sure people have heard that name. I'm not sure how familiar you are with what she did, but she actually started as a nurse by nursing her grandmother, who was sick and actually wealthy, and they turned their house into like a nursing home kind of deal. And what she found during nursing and acting as a nurse, the current conditions, she was like, oh my gosh, you know, this stuff doesn't work. Common things were bloodletting and all these things that they did. I don't remember all the things they did. JJ probably knows, she's in nursing school. But it was really not good. And one of the big things was they didn't make things sanitary. So you think today the first thing we talk about is, oh, clean a wound, right? Back then, it was like, no, let's take some more blood. Let's get the blood out or whatever. So she was a pioneer and actually started a medical college. And some of the things that we do today were because of the work that she did as a nurse. Mother Teresa, I'm sure everybody knows Mother Teresa, right? Mother Teresa was actually an Albanian nun who went to India and decided to live amongst the poor. You know, nuns always take like a vow of poverty. She decided, okay, let's really live this. She lived with, I think, the untouchables, which is in the caste system in India. Untouchable really means that you don't touch these people. They're so low that you would dirty yourself by touching them. So these people were starving. They had, you know, terrible, terrible conditions. So she actually lived among them and raised money for them to feed them and whatever. She did great things. Susan B. Anthony. I don't know if you heard that name. She actually there's a dollar coin, that's the Susan B. Anthony coin. That's how important she was. Well, she was a woman in the early 1800s active in the Temperance Society. Anyone know what the Temperance Society is? Alcohol, right. It was the lead up to the Prohibition. So her idea was, let's stop everybody from drinking, which obviously wasn't very popular. But there was a Temperance Society. She was active in it, but she wasn't allowed to speak because she was a woman. So obviously this didn't sit well with her. And she actually went on to lead the suffrage. Is it the suffrage movement? Yeah. So she became a leader in getting the right for women to vote in the United States. So these are things that we all take for granted. These are done by women, right? Great things that have done. Harriet Tubman. I don't know if you've heard of her. She was a slave, became an abolitionist to end slavery, and was very active in the Underground Railroad, which was the secret way to get slaves that were, you know, get them out of the South where they were slaves and up north. And this is the kind of thing that you get killed for, right? But so she was credited with helping over 300 slaves escape from the South. Sojourner Truth. You know, we go to Sojourner Truth Park. Well, turns out she was a slave that was born in Ulster County as a slave in Riften. She was a slave in Riften. She got sold a number of times. in 1799, New York State decided we need to abolish slavery, but it wasn't going to happen until 1827. So it took 28 years to become free. So she actually couldn't wait any longer. She escaped and went to somebody that she got thing. Anyway, she became an abolitionist to help the emancipation of slaves throughout the United States, and she helped recruit black men to fight in the Civil War. So these are all very powerful women that it did a lot for history. So a couple more. Sally Ride. I don't know if anybody knows Sally Ride. Sally Ride. First American woman in space. I don't know if you know anything about the astronaut program, but you have to be like a PhD in science, physics, math. You have to be really bright. You have to be physically be able to withstand the conditions, and psychologically be able to be subjected to a lot of that stuff. And I don't know what the numbers are, but it's very small chance that if you become an astronaut, that you'll actually make it to space. So this woman obviously had what they called the right stuff because she made it, and she was the first woman in space. Margaret Thatcher, first female prime minister in all of Europe. Obviously, she was prime minister in England, credited for helping, Ronald Reagan and the whole thing with bringing down the Soviets. And so very, very big woman in history. And the last one I have is Sandra Day O'Connor. I don't know if you know who that is, first female Supreme Court justice. So obviously you have to have some chops to become able to make that, right? So those are all kind of in history famous women. So then I said, well, let's look up who's famous today, okay? The top Google search famous woman, Lady Gaga. She has her fans, okay? Oprah. People are a little more okay with Oprah. Oprah's like a billionaire, right? Madonna. Still. Beyonce. Okay. Kim Kardashian. I see some of my fellow compatriots here. Kim Kardashian is worth $175 million. She made $52 million last year. Miley Cyrus. I don't know if you know her. She's, all these women are pretty famous, except for Oprah, I think, for doing things that are kind of like really out there. Not anything that I considered. They've studied a lot. They've accomplished a lot. They've just been really successful in social whatever, right? The last one I put down as a joke is Caitlyn Jenner. Anyway, so, but these people are worth a lot of money, right? Our society values them because we've rewarded them with a lot of money, with esteem, with money, right? So I feel like culture has changed to the point where we're really rewarding the wrong things, and we are products of our culture. It's around us. It surrounds us. It affects us. We have to realize that this force is pushing us a lot of times in the wrong directions. So I figured let's go back to what God says in the Bible for women, because I'm talking to women today. Men may listen. What does God say that a woman's role is? And let me first say, because I'm going to read from Proverbs 31. Sean, hold on. Don't put that up yet. But I want to put Proverbs 31:1 first. But there's a poem from 1865, William Ross Wallace. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but in that, there's one line in that. It says, "The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world." So he's obviously talking about the power of being a mother and what a mother's role is. So put up Proverbs 31:1. Please. So Proverbs 31:1 says, the words of King Lemuel, the oracle which his mother taught him. So I don't even know who King Lemuel is. Some people think that it was not. That was like, who wrote the Proverbs? Anyone? Whoever it was. Solomon. Whether or not it was him or not. But King Lemuel's mother made the first, she made the opening thing. So God obviously thought that his mother was important. She didn't get the fame because we don't even know what her name is, but she gets the first credit. And Proverbs 31, as you will see, talks about like the ideal woman, right? If you want to strive to be anybody, there it is right there. And the first thing he does is credit his mother. So God puts an importance on women and their role and mothers. So don't take it, don't think it's a light role. It's an extremely important role. And his mother affected his life to the point where he was giving the wisdom of the Proverbs to generations of people. So it really is her that passed it on to him. He's the one who said it. So anyway, okay, let's go 31:10 through 30. You guys have probably all heard this before, but we'll read it together anyway. While Sean's getting it, I'll start reading. An excellent wife who can find, for her worth is far above jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She looks for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She is like merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises also while it is still night and gives food to her husband and portions to her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. From her earnings she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She senses her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out at night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hands grasp the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor, and she stretches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household are clothed with scarlet. She makes coverings for herself, and her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, supplies belts to the tradesmen. Strength and dignity are her clothing. She smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household. She does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her, her husband also, and he praises her, saying, Many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. So this woman's got it together, okay? And her husband, while some may think, in the patriarchal society, especially back and then, women couldn't do anything. This woman is buying fields, selling them, using the profits, starting a vineyard, making stuff, selling. I mean, this woman is like a strong, independent feminist small business right here. And her husband has nothing but great things to say about her. Her children have nothing but great things to say about her. But she does all these things because she knows her place, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way at all. No, I don't mean that in a negative way. She knows who she is, and she's not subservient, yet she's a partner to her husband, but she understands her role in relationship. And her goal is to do the right thing, to be productive, and that in that she finds her fulfillment. Because one of the things it says in here, she talks about extending her hand to the poor. She's generous. Where's the shoot? I can't find it now. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and teaching of kindness is on her tongue. So this is the thing that are coming out of her. You know? See, this is what is naturally coming out of her as she's fulfilled as a woman. But she's fulfilled as a woman because of the life she's living. She's not fulfilled because she's famous on the internet or that people are admiring her for these selfies that they're posting. You know, no, I'm serious. No, Kim Kardashian is like, eesh. The only reason she's famous is because she's really unchaste, I think was the word I used last time. She's just not a modest woman, yet society is rewarding her for that, you know? Yet here's a woman who is probably the most modest woman you're going to find, right? But her strength and her beauty is in her inner character and what she does. And she's it seems to me that I'm maybe reading into it, but when you're speaking kindness, when you're being generous, these things that are coming out of you, you just can't help it, you know? She smiles at the future. I think that was the biggest line that I got. This woman doesn't have a worry in the world because she knows where she is. She knows who she is. None of these things are going to bother her because she knows who she is. Anyway, getting all worked up here. I got to say a funny thing. So I went pretty long last time, and we had a little thing, and a woman said to me, she goes, yeah, I said to my husband, does Keith know what time it is? And I said, isn't that just a nice, kind way of a woman to say, man, when is he going to shut up? Does he know what time it is? So I moved the clock back there, so I know what time it is now. Okay, so that's the Proverbs 31. Now we're going to talk about us and a few things that we can do. So, you know, Proverbs talks about action. We're going to go into Ephesians, which talks about attitude. And I think they're really close related, but they're a little bit different. So, Sean, put up Ephesians 5:22. So this is one of the things I danced around last time. It says, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. So we talked about wives being husbands being the spiritual leader in the house. Now we're talking about women have to see that, and you have to submit yourselves, right? And then in 24, it says, therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let wives be to their own husbands in everything. So I thought, okay, that's maybe difficult, but at least let's find out what submit means, right? What does submit mean? So I looked it up. So there's an intransitive verb and an intransitive verb and a transitive verb, which I really can't tell a difference. So one has to do with having an object to the verb and not, but I still don't know what it means. But anyway, I'll read them to you. It says, so the transitive version is to yield to governance or authority. Oof. Who's jumping right on? Yeah, that's submit. So women, who's jumping right onto that one? Let's yield to the governance or authority of your husband. Not in this society. So here's the intransitive verb. It says to yield oneself to the authority or will of another. Surrender. That's the definition now. Don't yell at me. To permit oneself to be subject to something. To defer or to consent to abide by the opinion or authority of another. So these are pretty heavy terms here. Yet that's what's in the Bible. Now, most men would say, hey, we like this so far. This sounds pretty good, right? Anything I say goes. Let me just bring up Ephesians 5:20 and 21. Shawnee. So I'll read it to you. It says, giving thanks for all things unto God and the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. So this submitting thing is not reserved just for wives to their husbands, but all of us should be submitting to one another when the time is right, when things are right. And if there are certain things, you should be submitting to one another. So this is not something that men can hold over women, but men should be held to each, so we should all be practicing this. Let's put it that way. So let's go to Ephesians 5:33. It says, nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. And that was King James, so American Standard says, nevertheless, each individual among you also is to love his wife even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. So let me just go over the definitions there. Reverence is to regard or treat with deep respect. And respect is to consider worthy of high regard. So it's kind of like they both say the same thing. The second definition was interesting to me. It says to refrain from interfering with. And I thought that's interesting. Like respect someone's privacy. If someone's authority, don't interfere with it, right? So these things seem pretty simple. And then the question that came up in my mind is, how do you respect someone you don't respect? Right? How do you respect someone you really don't respect because you got issues or whatever? And part of my answer will be, the book says to do it. Therefore, listen to what God says and then see what happens after that. Right? Be obedient and see what happens. Because I think that as you're obedient, there's a blessing that comes. And I think back to the Proverbs 31 lady. I think she was obedient what she was supposed to do, and her life flourished. But as I said a couple of weeks ago, for men, the Bible says love your wife. So our job is to love, their job is to respect. Neither of which comes very easy for men or women, because it's kind of the thing we lack is the thing that God's calling us to do. So, I had some feedback from someone, and we were talking about how men don't do stuff for their wives. And, that becomes a problem. We have our issues, my wife and I. Some stuff I don't do, she gets upset with me. And my only thing for other women, not for my wife, is men forget stuff. No, men forget stuff, right? Yes. Thank you, Jay. Men forget stuff. Women never forget anything. Like, they never forget anything, And I'll talk of a woman I know, not my wife, says, I told you that 7 months ago on a Thursday. And I'm like, okay, I don't remember. That gets women very upset. And studies have shown that women remember stuff because there's a feeling attached to it. Like they have a feeling about everything. So they remember everything because they felt something about that. Men don't attach feelings to a lot of stuff, okay? In this conversation I had with this woman, she's like, well, I asked him to do stuff he doesn't do it. I feel like he doesn't care about me. I'm like, let me just clue you in. Men don't attach feelings to tasks. Take out the garbage. Okay, I forgot. Well, if you cared about me, you wouldn't have forgotten. I'm like, I don't associate garbage with my wife. I don't associate tasks with liking her. I like her because I like her. I love her because I love her, not because I did something or didn't do something. But women do. So they're upset with their husband because their husband forgot to do something that he forgot. And she cares and he doesn't. But that's the way we're built. So men have to work on remembering to do stuff for their wives because they love them. But They have to remember that because it's not natural. I know, but but I'm saying it's not natural. If you forget that, you have to be reminded that your wife cares that you forgot. You know what I'm saying? You forgot to do something. Well, she cares about that. You're like, okay, well, if she cares about it, I should probably do it. But it's not a natural thing. It's unnatural for men to care about a task. Women associate this feeling like you're validating me because you love me because you did something for me. I'm like, no, that's not why I do it, right? And then, the second part of it is, well, I want you to want to do it. I say, well, that's never going to happen, so. But I'm speaking for myself. I'm sure you guys are different than that. So I just want to tell one story because I'm running late already. I can see that. So, men and women have different skills and abilities as well. And these are the differences between men and women, but you have to love your wife's abilities, and wives have to love their husband's abilities. They may not be what they want them to be, but you have to learn how to respect them, right? And show that respect. And if you don't know how to show your husband respect, you could ask him. And he might tell you. He might not. So then you just might want to just experiment. You'll know because he'll become more loving. But I'll tell you a quick story. So my wife is a wonderful mother. She's very emotional. I am not. I mean, I'm sometimes emotional, but I'm not. So I've come to the conclusion I would make a terrible mother. However, when there's an injury in the family, she's not Florence Nightingale. When she sees blood, she goes crazy. Like, ah! I'm thinking that's not what, in this story, my son, we were snowboarding, or we were sledding on Snyder's Hill, and somebody had a little plastic snowboard. He said, let me try it. So he put it on, he went down the hill, and I saw him fall down at the bottom. This is David. He falls at the bottom. He's coming back up. He took the snowboard off. He's walking back up, and his face is red, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm thinking, what the heck? He gets to the top, and we're all looking at him like, and he's like, what? I go, is everything okay? He goes, yeah, why? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's just bleeding all over the place. So I kind of said, well, you got a little blood on there. And then he started getting upset, like, what? And it was a head wound. And if you know anything about head wounds, they bleed like crazy. It's not a big deal, but they bleed like crazy. So I'm thinking, all right, we got to get this home, got to keep the blood off him so he doesn't get all worked up. And then I got to get him into the house. I'm thinking, this is not going to work because she's going to freak out. And this poor kid starting, he's starting to be like, hey, what, you feel blood dripping on your head. It does cause you a little concern. So I'm thinking, how do we do this? So I think it was Sean and somebody else, I said, go in the house. And I maybe even told him, keep your boots on. And she'd be like, get your boots off. I said, and then tell her you're cold, and she'll quick make you hot chocolate. She'll get you blankets. And in the meantime, I took David through the basement, up the basement stairs into the bathroom, and kind of wiped all the blood off and got most of it done. And then I finally brought him in the kitchen, said, okay, here's your deal, right? So my point is, she's a great mother. She loves her children. She wants the best for them. But some things she's not good at, like not freaking out when the kid's bleeding all over his head. Me, on the other hand, I realized, all right, we got to handle this situation. I figured how to do it so it best worked, right? Now, one could say, well, that's pretty cold. You could at least hug the kid or whatever. I'm like, all right, there's time for that later, But I did my job. That was my job. That's the way I did things. And then she took care of him and hugged him and whatever, and, after that. But there's a difference between us, and that yours might not be that way, but that's the way God built us. So you have to learn to appreciate that. She could have been like, why didn't you take him right to the doctor? What? But she didn't. She realized, okay, wasn't that big a deal, once it was all done. But you have to respect each other's abilities. So I'm going to end with this thing. I mean, submitting and respecting can be a tough thing. It's your choice, right? We all have choices. It's your choice. But when you follow God's rules, then he blesses your obedience. And you'll find, I feel, that God can change your husband's heart, your man's heart, in a way that you want him to be changed, but you've never been successful in doing. If you do what you're supposed to do, God can change him to do what he's supposed to do. So I'm going to leave you with that. And I guess if anyone wants prayer after, we'll do that. Otherwise, Adam's going to sing a song, and then we'll have bagels. Thank you.